Hello, everyone. Welcome to my part two of my podcast on everything that's going on now in the U.S. government. um, in part one, we talked about some of the major foci of Trump and Musk's initiatives in the U.S., the uh, restriction of illegal immigration, deportations, the uh, cutting away of federal agencies, the shrinking and downsizing of federal agencies, the suspension of their activities, his foreign policy weird embrace of dictatorships around the world, and his abandonment of our traditional democratic allies internationally, uh, his obsession with tariffs, uh, probably both as a negotiating tool and as a way he thinks of raising substantial federal revenue to support his tax cuts. We talked about these various different thrusts of policy here. And what I've seen a lot of folks struggle with, and what I've struggled with personally, is if you put all these things together, is there an overarching philosophy to it? I mean, is there some sort of coherent philosophy or worldview that supports all these different actions Trump is trying to take? And understanding there may not be. There may not be a coherent worldview behind it. But if we sort of boil down the initiatives as to what their overall effects are likely to be, can narrow it down to a few things, which eventually I think probably narrows it down overall to something that's closer to the truth than a lot of the stuff that I've heard, quite frankly, on podcasts, both left and right so far. For example, some of the social changes that Trump is doing is in trying to engineer through anti-DEI activities, and in his mind, probably some of the anti-government activities too, is basically to restore the societal dominance of white Christian men. You know, historically in the U.S., white Christian men were the ones that counted, right? Even in the Constitution, you know, they were the only ones guaranteed a vote on the things that the public could vote on. So I think Trump misses the good old days of antebellum, the antebellum U.S., when we had slavery and when women didn't yet vote, and you know our world here was dominated by white Christian men, and specifically white Christian men with money who were landowners. So I think a lot of things he's doing are geared toward that. There's a racist foundation for it. Not only racist, but misogynist too, because it's really more about men than it is about women. Women are still subjugated under the Trump regime. I mean, he got Roe versus Wade overturned, and states have put in, some states have put in laws since then that not only prevent women from accessing abortion, but really mess with women's access to their reproductive health care. So that hasn't been particularly good for most women in those states. So really and there's a very misogynistic undertone to that. So really we're talking about restoring the societal dominance of white Christian men. Now, Trump considers himself a white Christian man, so that helps him with his dominance, where women who might not like some of the things that he does with them or says with them, don't have recourse against him, right? So, this plays into a theme that I'm going to come in at the end as an overarching theme to the stuff that Trump is doing. destroying the system of U.S. federal system of checks and balances, essentially neutering the legislature, making the courts impotent, getting rid of the Fourth Estate, the independent press, ensures that there would be no effective domestic opposition to anything that Trump does, to any of his decisions, his whims, his beliefs. Nothing gets challenged of his. So maybe you can sort of see the tying together theme now between the first thing and the second thing. Is Trump destroying federalism because he has some belief that federalism is a weak system, that democracy is a weak system, that dictatorships are the way things should be? Maybe he does have that philosophy, and I speculated about that in the first video. But I think it's really simpler than that, because I don't really think Trump has an overarching political philosophy of any kind. But I think he does have a belief that he's right, and he doesn't want to be challenged, and he wants to make the world safe for him. And so he wants a world where he's not challenged. He wants a world where he's just right a priori. He wants a world where his orders are followed, where his whims are indulged, and where his personal safety is assured. And so the destruction of U.S. federalism is, for Trump, I think, not about any political philosophy or believing one system's better than another. It's about that destroying U.S. federalism makes it easier for him to get things done that he wants to get done. Makes it easier for his beliefs not to be challenged and for his orders not to be questioned. And if he's got to destroy U.S. democracy to do it, he'll destroy U.S. democracy to do that, to make his life easier. Now, as far as his international ideas, his embracing of despots and dictators around the world, his disdain for democratic governments around the world, I think he believes that, democratic governments are not very supportive of his ideas, his beliefs. They don't see they have a more DEI worldview and a more inclusive worldview than he has, and he finds that threatening. But as far as dictators go, a lot of people talk about his admiration for dictators and, how he likes the strength that they have. And I think that's true. I think he believes that he's safer in a dictatorship because no one will dare question him or, arrest him. I think Trump was probably traumatized by both losing the last election and in 2020, and also by the prosecutions of him post that election, where, if he hadn't won the presidency again, he could have really gone to prison. So you think about, what is it a rich, powerful, narcissistic guy is more afraid of than anything? Well, losing his money, losing his position in society, losing his freedom, losing his life. Those are the things he's most afraid of. So how does he create a world where those things are less likely to happen? Well, if he's a dictator in an anti-democratic society, in a society that's abandoned its democracy and its checks and balances and its Fourth Estate, then he's not going to be challenged domestically. He's not going to be arrested. He's not going to be prosecuted. His whims are going to be followed, all of which makes his life better and safer in his mind. But also, as far as the foreign actors go, the folks who could really be a threat to the United States and therefore to him personally, China, Russia, their militaries are strong enough to threaten us. And, Russian agents are probably, Trump has some legitimate fear of, targeting by Russian agents for assassination, etc. So, you think about somebody as successful as Donald Trump. What is it? They're life's biggest winners. He's life's biggest winner right now, probably in the whole world. He and Elon Musk are life's biggest winners. Do they deserve to be? No, they're not good human beings, but they are. And so what would life's biggest winner fear more than anything else? Well, losing their life, because they lose that game once they lose their life. So the folks, the foreign actors who could really threaten Trump's life, the powerful dictators around the world, if Trump embraces them and makes friends with them, they're less likely to attack him because he's embracing them. He knows our Democratic allies aren't going to attack him. So he's not in fear of his life. He's not in fear of them. But he may fear Putin. He may fear Xi and the potential threat they could be to him, to his position in the United States. If he makes friends with them, if he does what they want, then that fear pretty much goes away. Why would they get rid of somebody who's essentially their puppet? And again, I'm not saying how real this is in the real world. I'm just saying that in Trump's mind, there's probably some reality to it. There's strong dictators in the world who he perceives could be a threat to him. He makes friends with them so that they won't be a threat to him. There's opposition in the U.S. that could be, in the U.S. systems of government and checks and balances that could be a threat to him. He makes those go away. He attacks those. He wrecks those. So what's the net effect of all this? Is there an overarching philosophy? Yeah, I think so. The overarching philosophy is to make the world nicer and safer for Donald Trump. Safer for him. Better for him in the sense of he's not going to be questioned. His ideas are not going to be challenged. His orders are not going to be countermanded. His dominance is going to be accepted completely. And people are going to defer to him in all ways. And all people. Women, men, everybody. That's the narcissistic mindset. That's paradise to a narcissist. Trump is creating his own paradise here. Does he have to destroy the U.S. democracy to do it? Yeah. Does he have to totally upend and reverse all of our international relations to do it? Yeah, in his mind he does. So he does it. And I think you could actually see just about everything he's doing through that lens. Does this make the world better for me? Does this make the world safer for me? Does this make more people have to bow down to me? Yes. And if the answer is yes, let's do it. Doesn't matter if it's legal, doesn't matter who it hurts outside of me, right? It's a very old-fashioned, brutal dictatorship, brutal monarchy mindset. I am the king, you bow down to me, you honor me, you supplicate me, you make my life grander, you make my position more exalted. And that's your job. My job is to be the exalted one. Your job is to make the world safe for me and to exalt me. So I think really all of this in various iterations boils down to just, in the simplest terms, Trump's pure narcissistic fantasies and tendencies. is it going to make America great again? So are Trump's interests here aligned with our national interest? Will it make our country, by making Trump the supreme leader and his world beautiful and better, will it make our country better and greater? And as the Russians like to say, yet, no, of course not. For most of us, it's going to make us pretty miserable. So is there anything we can do about it? Yeah, but lots of people are going to get hurt. Really hurt. Historically, the only way dictatorships fall or can be actively resisted is through mass protest, mass resistance, national insurrections. One person can't, even somebody as determined as Trump, can't by himself lead a nation of millions without their cooperation. So if people stop cooperating, and I mean en masse, it would have to be a majority of people. Could this be effectively reversed? Sure. Trump could even be deposed, the way dictators are sometimes deposed. I mean, a lot of dictators don't end up, some dictators end up doing great their whole lives. Stalin did all right. But a lot of them end up on the business end of a rope, like Gaddafi. Well, there's a lot of them you can name. I kind of admire Brazil right now because they got rid of their wannabe Trump guy and they're actually prosecuting him. He lost the last election and they're actually prosecuting him. So Brazil did what U.S. couldn't do with their Trump wannabe. But since our Trump wannabe is actually Trump and he's already in office with gaining more control over the U.S. by the minute, is really at this point I think is going to take mass resistance to slow him down or stop him. And the truth is he's going to oppose the mass resistance using force because he's got the force on his side. So if we did engage in mass resistance, many folks would be prosecuted, many would lose their freedom, many would die. Because when there's open rebellion against an administration, that's what happens. So I can't tell you this is going to be an easy thing or a safe thing to do. It isn't. Overthrowing dictatorships is never easy or safe. It often fails. It often takes many attempts. And in the failures, there are many deaths and many people losing their freedoms and many people being tortured. And that's the way this goes. That's where we are. A lot of people, I think, are still holding out hope that somehow democracy wins, maybe through the courts, maybe the courts resist. At this point, we're beyond that. By the time the courts get to most of these cases, it's going to be too late to restore any kind of normalcy anyway. And even if the courts rule against Trump, which they may not, ultimately, but even if they do, Trump's going to ignore the court orders. And so the courts are neutered. Congress is neutered because Trump has the majority and the Republicans are way too afraid of him to go against him, even if they don't believe in what he's doing. I know some Democrats are holding out hope for the elections in a couple of years that we might get, a Democratic Congress in place. They're assuming that there's going to be a free and fair election in a couple of years. I don't think it's going to be possible in a couple of years. I think by then, free and fair elections in the U.S. will be a thing of the past. And so there won't be any way for Democrats to win anything. Hope I'm wrong about that, but I don't think so. So for those of you holding out hope for elections in 2 years, I don't think there's going to be enough left of our democracy in 2 years for there to be normal, free, and fair elections, and for that even to matter. So I think anything we do, we have to do this year And what has to be done is mass insurrection, mass protest, mass resistance at every turn. Every time Trump orders something, if it affects you, you resist. You don't do what he says. Even if what he says is firing you, you come to work anyway. You insist on getting paid. Because the firings aren't even legal. Now, is that going to matter? No. Are you going to get, does that mean, if you do that, are your paychecks going to be restored? No. But the doing of it sends messages. If it's done en masse. If just a few people do it, not really going to have an effect. If a lot of people do it, it is. The alternative to mass resistance here is essentially just accepting a Trump family dictatorship for the foreseeable future in the United States and watching the American experiment die, watching democracy die in the US, and watching America itself wither into a poor, second-tier, economically messed up, despotic nation. Essentially watching us turn into Venezuela or Chile, or let's see, Chile under Pinochet, I should say. Not Chile today. Watching us turn into, just a terrible place to live that stands for nothing and that economically becomes weaker and weaker until our currency is no longer valued globally, which means that we get crushed by our own debt. So if you'd rather see that, or if you'd rather just leave the country, I wouldn't blame you for that one. Though you should know that fewer and fewer other countries are willing to accept permanent American citizens now, because so many Americans are leaving. But, if you want to get out, I understand getting out. Certainly contemplated that myself. But if you want to stay, it ain't going to be pretty. And the only alternative is the mass resistance one. That's it. There is no other. Our checks and balances system is now broken. Trump has wrecked it. It won't save you. You won't be saved by others. You have to save yourselves here. We have to save ourselves. And that's it. We have no knights coming to the rescue now. We are the knights. We have to go into battle if we want to win the war. So, sorry to end it with that, but that's where we are. I wish you good luck and the best.